So, kind of discontinuing the October theme of spooky, I'm instead moving along with The Mandalorian, since Season 2 premieres on Disney Plus this month, and depending upon when this video goes up, you may or may not have already watched it. So in celebration of the second season, I opened up the first few figures based on characters from The Mandalorian Season 1. They are packaged in what's known as the Force Awakens boxes, or the Red Wave, depends upon what you want to call them. And as you probably saw in the video, I had already opened up the Mandalorian, which the show is based around, because I bought him back during Triple Force Friday, which was the event they held when they were releasing Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, and the Jedi Order merchandise. Now, other than the Mando, the other figures in that first collection include the Child, the Heavy Infantry Mandalorian, Cara Dune, and IG-11. Now, two of these figures, the Heavy Mandalorian and IG-11, were actually Best Buy exclusives that were kind of poorly handled. The Heavy Mandalorian sold out fairly quickly online and in stores. If you were lucky to find them, kudos to you. IG-11 didn't sell as well. I think I actually found him clearanced in a few places. And then Cara Dune was briefly in stores, but she's a highly sought after character, so if you were lucky enough to come across her, then you were one of the rare two. And of course, all the Child merchandise is just slamming stores right now, so if you can't find one of these little guys, I'm very surprised, because I see at least 5 or 6 in every Walmart I've been into. So these figures are pretty hard to track down. Mando actually only ever saw on Triple Force Friday. I never saw Heavy Infantry Mandalorian or Cara Dune in stores, and IG-11 and the Child were the only ones I actually picked up in person. So the way I got a hold of these two was through Entertainment Earth, who's gotten a hold of several of Hasbro's exclusives that have been mismanaged. So if you're still looking for them, I believe they're still on stock, so go ahead and check out entertainmentearth.com. Now, as far as these figures go, they are a pretty good set of them. They do have some flaws, but otherwise they're pretty great. We'll start with the Bounty Hunter droid, IG-11. I keep wanting to say IG-88 just out of sheer habit, and this is actually a repaint of that same figure, and it's a pretty good paint scheme. He's got a little bit more color than IG-88. I'm not a big fan of the legs of this figure. It takes a little bit of work to get him to stand up just right, and as far as poses, you don't really have too many options. He's got ball joints in the shoulders, and he's got some swivel joints in most of the knee, the leg, and the thigh and the ankle. He's got some odd joints here in the elbow that I think are just ball joints, but you can't really do much more than have it straight out with a slight angle. There are little holes in the bottom of these blasters that lets you attach to a peg on his hand so he can hang on to his guns. I was always just sitting them in there all loosey and hoping he didn't drop them. So that was kind of a cool feature that I'm embarrassed that it took me this long to find out about. Moving on to the Heavy Infantry Mandalorian. This is a pretty nice bulky figure. He's got a nice big Gatling gun. He is definitely heavy. Cool little backpack on his back that I'm having trouble getting to stay in there all the time, just because the peg is slightly bigger than the hole. The paint job on him looks great. He's got some good details in the armor. I like him. He's got some good solid joints, some good weight. He's a lot of fun to pose. He looks pretty cool. I think he's definitely worth getting. Now, moving on to one of my favorite figures and one of my favorite characters from the show is Cara Dune. I was super excited to finally get a hold of this figure. I honestly didn't expect that I would ever be able to add it to my collection, just because of how hard she was to track down. The detail on her face is really great. Unfortunately, I don't know if I just got a bad one or not, but the Rebel tattoo on her cheek just looks mostly like a dot in this version. Like I said, I might have had a bad one, because I feel like I've seen photos online of people who have had better versions. The gun she's got is pretty cool. It's not nearly as big and bulky as the Heavy Mandalorian, but she looks pretty awesome holding it. She also comes with a pistol that fits nice in her holster, and unfortunately she comes along with a knife that just doesn't have anywhere to store, which is kind of frustrating, because it's always the chance that she might lose it or misplace it. So I just kind of have it tucked into her belt in the back, and so far that's worked out. Now moving along to the child, I feel like he's just a little too small. I don't know, the scale just seems slightly off. It's really hard to tell with some of the promotional photos from the show whether or not he's the correct size. Just looking at him, he feels a little small. I feel like they could have made him just a slightly bit bigger. Now because of his size, there's not much they could do with articulation. He's got a ball-jointed head, he's got sockets for his arms, which also pop out really easy on mine, so you really have to be careful when moving him around. He's got ball sockets feet, and that's really it. The detail on his face is really great, though. I was really surprised for the size they had for him. I think they did an incredible job on his eyes and his face. There's also two versions of him floating around. If you got one of the earlier versions of him, then the collar and the cuffs were not a lighter beige. They were actually the same as the rest of his coat. So if you waited to get him and you got one of these newer versions, good on you, good for waiting. They're pretty easily to find right now, so the older version might be a little bit more harder to track down if you're one of those people who collects all the different variants and versions of them. He comes with a handy little carrying case for all his tiny little accessories. He comes with a little knob from the Razor Crest's control shift, a little bowl, and then a frog. The frog's got some pretty good detail on him. The bowl is kind of pointless because he can't move his arms around to hold it. So it looks kind of odd in his hands. Good luck with not losing any of these things. If you last 20 years and never lose any of these, then good on you. Honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to take these out and open them. I'm just going to keep it like this, just to make sure I don't lose anything. Now, moving on to the Mando in question. This is a great figure. If you were one of the lucky few to get a hold of him, then you know what I'm talking about. Really, my only complaint is I hate this plastic cape. I really wish they would just have given him a cloth cape. The only other thing would be, I think the brown paint on the back of the rifle is just a little too thin because it's already starting to come off every time I take it in and out of his hands. So that's a little frustrating. Other than his rifle and cape, he's got a pistol that fits nicely in the holster. He's got all sorts of joints, so you can pose him in all sorts of cool ways and display him in really neat situations. All around, a great figure. And all of these are really great figures. I'm really happy that I managed to get a hold of them and was able to add them to my collection. Like I said at the time of the posting of this video, Entertainment Earth still had these three in stock. So if you want them, buy them up now because they're well worth it. And you shouldn't have too much trouble finding the child in brick and mortar stores too. As far as Mando goes, they're really going to have to start mass producing him and stop making him an exclusive. Scalpers are just going to continue buying him up and making it impossible for everybody to get. So I don't know why, with a character this popular, they're making so few of them. They really need to up their game. So here's hoping down the line he gets re-released in the Archives line or just in another wave as a repack. We can hope. So this is probably going to be the last video for the while again. I know, I'm sorry for the gaps. Moving situation is still being a bit of an issue. I do have a Venusaur video that's partially finished, so I might get around to finishing that if I end up having time. So until then, if you missed any of my videos, please watch the old ones. And like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if there's a toy out there that you've been wanting me to cover, and I'll try and track it down and do a video for it. And as you can see on the back of my shelf, I still have quite a few things lined up to unbox and show for you. So keep an eye on the channel. I will be getting around to it. And until then, stay safe. Happy hunting.